I really don't have a video idea for this intro. All I know is that it's snowing its butt off, and I wanted this to be an intro. Oh, and yeah, that that's a pat of butter on the tree. GameMasters here, and I finally got a fairly fun video idea. Maybe I just needed to chill my brain for a moment. A few days ago, I posted, what is a burning question you have that is specific to Dungeons and Dragons? And you guys really didn't disappoint. At Tinwelin asks, how to balance fun versus high stakes. And he's specifically asking in regards to higher level campaigns where the characters are facing off with cataclysmic events and forces. While this sounds like it could be a challenge, the solution is actually pretty simple. Consider this. When you go to watch a blockbuster movie, the kind where you can scarf down buttered popcorn and have your fill of that bottomless large soda, aren't they almost always just fun to watch? The heroes usually get to the brink of death. The world begins to crumble around them, and I'm talking about movies like The Day After Tomorrow or 2012, even something goofy like Sharknado. They all have that one thing in common. It's a hero tasked with saving the day. So too is a high-level adventure. As a DM, the task is to bring the characters to the brink. It's still got to be their story, but epic level characters deserve to face epic level challenges. Pushing the envelope is the key here, and because of that, everyone at the table needs to accept that danger is in the cards. Just like in the movies, not every hero may survive, and then should one take the wrong action, then so be it. Should the dice fail them at a critical moment, that's the luck of the draw. But the way I see it, once characters are at or above level 14, 15, and so forth, they should have resources, either through spells, items, or even just flat out gold, with which they can get a companion resurrected. The point here is to take cues from the fast-paced high adventure that we see in those big blockbuster movies, and tether those concepts to your adventure. Don't have a preconceived endgame. You still got to let the players craft the story as to what their characters will do, but it's still okay to have events happen with or without their interaction. For example, if the focus of the adventure was that a powerful lich was raising an army of undead to march towards the south, Game of Thrones, perhaps the characters have stopped the Lich himself, but the army of zombies continues to march, only now they're marching without direction. Fun and calamity can still happen, and a good challenge is usually key to that. You don't want to throw something out there just for sake of throwing something out there, but likewise, you don't want to have a simple task that higher level characters are going to easily roll over. Giving them a challenge that takes them to the edge, and then coming up with a solution has never failed to generate fun at my table. Obviously, the exact situation is going to vary from table to table, but when in doubt, I just pull inspiration from a TV show or movie, change it up to fit my campaign, and usually the fun is had by everyone at the table. At Aironfaar asks, how do you rationalize spell slots within the story, specifically in 5e games? He goes on to detail the Vancian concept, where in older editions of the game, certain classes of casters needed to memorize a spell in advance, and that they could only cast that given spell once. That if they wanted to cast it again, they'd need to rest or meditate to regain it. So here's my take on that spell casting. At my table, we don't use spell points. We don't use spell slots in the Vancian tradition. Spell slots instead are used only as a cap to a given level. For example, a caster of, say, level 1 won't have access to every level 1 spell at once. Well, let me rephrase. They have access to every level 1 spell, but not all at the same time. The spell slot is merely a cap for that given level. For example, a level 1 sorcerer has 2 spell slots. If they want to stash magic missile into both, then they can cast it twice until they complete a long rest, at which time they can switch up what they are able to cast from their other spells in their library. But I've also added in that they can attempt to cast any other spell that they may not have prepared, but they'd still need to have access to it. I've never been a fan of shutting down a caster because they've spent all of their spell slots. Imagine running a combat-heavy session, and the sorcerer spends all their spell slots in the first combat scenario. Then the party advances further into the dungeon and are face-to-face with a band of goblins. The sorcerer is now pretty much useless, and it's just not going to be fun for that player. So my fix is that they can attempt to cast any given spell that they could have access to, but at a slight disadvantage. For example, let's say that they have cast Magic Missile twice, used up their 2 spell slots, but need to cast it a third time. Instead of doing 1d4 plus 1 force damage, it would instead do half the damage rolled, rounded down. So if they rolled a 4 plus the 1 is 5, half of 5 is 2.5. Rounded down, they'd be doing 2 damage. Further, there's a chance that the spell simply won't work. It's a rolling difficulty, getting higher as they successfully cast more spells that they didn't have at the ready, and upon failing, they may take a level of exhaustion, or a hit to exhaustion. Regarding spells that don't do damage, take Locate Creature. Casting it normally lets you sense the direction of a creature's location if it's within 1,000 feet of you, and if it's moving. You know the direction that it is moving. If you've spent all your spell slots, at my table, you'd still be able to cast it, but again, it would be at a disadvantage. So instead of 1,000 feet, it might only work if that creature is within 500 feet of you, and you may or may not know the direction that it was ultimately moving in. I've done this at my table because, as mentioned, there are times when we do a lot of combat, and I hate for the casters to simply stand there. Yeah, they can poke things with a dagger or swing a staff, but the core of the caster is to cast spells, so I let them have that. For those curious, I've not found that this lends to casters being overpowered at higher levels. For one, they have more spell slots, but two, that disadvantage has them pick carefully what they may try to cast. I cannot promise that how it works at my table will work at every table, but my players all enjoy it, and they've never complained. As for the in-game reason for it, I look at it almost like any other skill. If you are a blacksmith, are you limited to swinging the hammer twice in one day? Or if you wield a sword, can you only swing it twice in any given day? And to use it again, or to swing that hammer again, you've got to finish a long rest to reset those the use to do that. What about something like making a dex check? Are you limited to only making 2 dex checks a day? Then you've got to finish a long rest to replenish your dex slots. I've never liked that for spells and spellcasters that they can't do that. So I have them so that they can tap into the ability to make casts. Mr. Welch asks, how big does this rash have to be before I need to see a cleric? Buddy, that depends on what kind of rash it is. If it's a rug rash from scooting aggressively across the carpet, wear that sucker like a badge of honor until it fades. But if it's something like a rash from poison ivy, yeah, seek help from the cleric immediately, especially if you got it from aggressively scooting yourself across poison ivy leaves. At Anakin Skywalker Ghost 8964 asks, how do you handle the end of a campaign? So many people talk about how campaigns just fizzle out or end in a seemingly forgettable way. Listen, I know exactly what you mean here. I have the exact same complaint about movies and TV shows that reach their final season's finale and simply just end. And it's like the writers just forgot to end the show itself and simply just walked out of the writer's room. I'm like you in that I want my campaigns to be beyond fun from beginning to end. I want the players to remember it and talk about it long after it's ended. Several years ago, I came up with something called the character in-game vision. I did a video on this a few months back, but essentially it's a way for the players to detail out elements that they would like to see happen as the adventure begins to unfold its ending. And if you'd like a copy of this, I'll leave a link down in the description as to where you can get one. But generally, I'll hand this out about 6 months before the end of the adventure, and I ask what the character's ultimate goal is, their long-term objective. I want to know what how each character wants to be remembered. Do they want to be remembered as a hero, a tyrant, a noble leader, a wise queen? Something along those lines. I have them detail out what their ideal ending would be. Would they make a heroic sacrifice, or do they seek out a peaceful retirement? Do they have any unresolved conflicts or rivalries that we didn't circle back around to at any point in the adventure? I also ask them to then detail out what the worst case scenario ending could be for their character, but also what their ideal outcome would be as the player. In other words, not necessarily what the character would see as ideal, but what the player would see as being ideal. I also ask them to describe their character's final scene before the story fades to black. I also let them know that not everything listed in this is going to be included in the campaign. But since making this document and getting the players to fill them out, I have found that the campaign ending is usually pretty damn epic. I don't pull out everything that they list and pack it into the final session, but instead I'll pepper elements of their in-game vision throughout the final 5 or so months of play. There's a bird got my attention there, and it's freezing out here. Holy crap. We generally play once a week, so I'm able to take elements and spread them out over roughly 20 or so sessions. I found that doing this really keeps the campaign from fizzling out and gives closure to something that we have all invested a good year's worth of dice rolling and storytelling into. I want to thank everyone for watching. If any of what we went over today was entertaining, I only ask that you give the video a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. I also need to thank all of my YouTube members and Patreon supporters, as their contributions to the channel have been beyond generous, and they deserve a grand shout out. If you'd like to check out how to become a YouTube member or a Patreon supporter, I'll leave a link down in the description, as well as right here below me. I'd also like to invite everyone over to the GameMasters Discord, as we get questions like this all the time, and I love chatting with each of you. My Discord link is listed below as well, down in the description, but also below this little box. I hope that I gave some fun answers to the questions asked, but I'd also love to hear from others. Of the questions asked today, what would your answers be? Let me know how creative you are down in the comments, and until next our paths cross, may you not get too terribly cold, and may your spells, may the casting of your spells rather, be unending.